also a treasure island piled high with food in the middle of the river. Would they risk being eaten to grab it, or simply give up? 3 months ago, I built this experimental arena with my own hands. This crazy civilization experiment is destined to have winners, losers, and hunters. Next, the hell-level survival documentary officially begins. Day 1. I carved out a river channel and filled both sides of the tank with soil, setting up a world of difference for the 2 ant colonies from the very start. Deep within the soil, I buried cockroaches and silkworms. That is a high-protein treasure for the ants, but to eat it, they have to dig through the entire earth. If they can't do it, this reward will rot in the dirt and disappear forever. At the same time, I planted an ant plant in the center of the jungle. Its massive rhizome is hollow, and the inside is full of natural secret chambers, simply a fortress tailor-made for ants. In nature, ants will live inside to protect the plant from natural enemies, and the plant rewards them with nutrients. This is a cross-species trade. And beside it, I planted a carnivorous plant. At the time, it looked completely harmless, but in the near future, it will become the most insidious hunter in this rainforest. Across the river, everything was kept simple. I filled the desert with thorny plants. These spikes provide almost no water or nutrients. If an ant wants to find a single seed, it must desperately navigate through a forest of needles. With both worlds ready, it was time to welcome their rulers. I brought out 2 queens. They had already mated a few years ago, storing the sperm inside their bodies. With just that one storage, they can continuously lay eggs and single-handedly propagate an entire empire. I released the jungle queen first. Unbelievably, she crawled straight toward the carnivorous plant. She was so close. One wrong step and the experiment would have to end before it even began. Fortunately, at the last moment, she turned around, squeezed into another nest, and disappeared underground in the jungle. Next, the desert queen took the stage. Her fierce worker ants started digging holes within seconds, leading her underground to establish a new home. Soon after, the first storm arrived. Rain fell onto this miniature world, and the river waters rose, separating the 2 colonies forever. On the jungle side, tender green shoots broke through the soil. Day 15. Both ant colonies have already built a complex palace, carving out multiple rooms inside. Those dead insects buried deep in the desert soil after days of digging were finally bumped into by a group of worker ants. The ants swarmed over, bit into the food, and worked together to carry it. The fragmented food started being transported into the tunnels. On the jungle side, there seemed to be no movement. But in fact, they had secretly discovered this treasure long ago. Before I even noticed, they had eaten the entire batch of silkworms clean. Their antennae can detect faint pheromone scents, and a layer of soil couldn't stop them. Day 17. I gave the desert a bounty, a miniature lotus pod filled with seeds. That is an ant's favorite food, but the seeds were tightly wrapped by a hard outer shell. To eat them, they must break the door down. The moment the pod dropped, it was surrounded by ants. One ant even squeezed its entire back inside, trying to tear open a seed, but all efforts were completely fruitless so far. Meanwhile, to make this river not just a barrier but a true hunting ground, I introduced dragonfly nymphs. These aquatic predators will hunt any small creatures that get too close. As soon as they entered the water, they went straight to the bottom and lurked, waiting for an opportunity to strike. These tiny underwater assassins will later crawl out of the water and become dragonflies, but right now, it is just a silent dagger. A nymph slowly crawled toward the shore, as if knowing that was exactly where the ants appeared. Sure enough, an ant appeared on that same shoreline. In a flash, the nymph shot forward, extended its retractable jaws, violently clamped onto the ant, and dragged it straight into the water. It was time to enjoy a feast. Day 30. I pushed the experiment to a brand new level. I created something neither tribe had ever seen before, an island overflowing with the most delicious seeds. But to reach it, the ants had to cross that deadly river. Even if they survived crossing the river, the challenge was far from over. I very reluctantly coated the island with an extremely slippery chemical. Once the ants climbed onto the island's base, they could barely hold on. And even if they successfully reached the top, there was one final hurdle. They had to carry all the seeds back to their nest. Would the ants risk their lives for this grand prize, or would they choose to give up? It wasn't long before one ant made a bold move. It got too close to the edge, its foot slipped, and it fell straight into the river. The water engulfed it, but it didn't drown. Instead, it was washed right next to the island. Purely by chance, the ant reached the base of the island and immediately started climbing upward. Oh, so cunning, it kept losing its grip and sliding down as it climbed. But then, it found a narrow channel where its feet could finally find purchase. This time, it didn't slip again. The ant slowly climbed to the top of the seeds, but look, it didn't even pick up a single seed. Ants don't just simply forage. They are also drawing maps. They leave pheromone trails so they can travel back and forth along the exact same path. So, despite surviving the perilous journey, this ant knew it hadn't yet figured out the terrain to safely transport the seeds back. Back on the desert side, something incredible was unfolding. Other ants caught the scent, and the colony began building a living bridge across the water. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until beneath the surface, a nymph was quietly approaching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly it erupted. The nymph dashed forward, grabbed 3 ants at once, and dragged them underwater. This ant bit back at the nymph, gnawing fiercely, refusing to let go even underwater. The hunter actually became the prey. These ants are not to be messed with. The nymph eventually broke free and disappeared into the depths of the river. After the nymph retreated, the ants rebuilt the bridge. With the bridge in place, the first batch of ants successfully crossed and climbed onto the island. And this time, they didn't hesitate. One by one, they grabbed the seeds and carried them from the island back to their own nest. This desert tribe now had a massive reserve of seeds, enough to sustain them for weeks. While the jungle ants were still struggling day after day, the desert colony gained the upper hand for the first time. But on the jungle side, a completely different scene was playing out. A fruit fly flew into the carnivorous plant. This plant doesn't capture its prey immediately, but as the fly continuously moved and struggled, it released more of its sticky coating, slowly tangling its legs and wings. The more the fly struggled, the tighter it got stuck, until it was completely immobilized. A moment later, the jungle ants caught the scent of protein. They swarmed in, dragged the trapped fruit fly out, and carried it away like a trophy. The plant's sticky trap was still not enough to stop the ants. Day 40, I woke up to find something strange. Giant black ants were roaming on the glass enclosure. I have no idea how they broke in. These black ants are incredibly fast, even able to climb the glass walls. In the ant world, outsiders are never guests, they are enemies. The jungle ants immediately charged forward to drive out the invaders. Jaws locked together, they pushed and pulled, fighting for control. Alarm pheromones spread throughout the entire colony, and more worker ants rushed over. Eventually, the black ants slowed down. The jungle ants had won. Soon, they began clearing the remains to prevent any further damage to the colony. I carefully removed any lingering black ants. Not long after the battle ended, the ants began carrying away the fallen invaders, turning the casualties of war into a fresh source of protein. Did you know? This type of black ant was once used by humans as natural surgical sutures. They would bite tightly onto a wound, and after their bodies were removed, their heads would remain fixed in place like a staple. Day 50, I introduced an armored darkling beetle. This type of beetle has a strange defense mechanism. When threatened, they stop in their tracks, lower their heads to the ground, raise their abdomens high, and release a strongly irritating and foul-smelling chemical odor. The ants seem to understand this warning. But the blue death-feigning beetle possesses dual superpowers. First, when threatened, it will play dead, remaining rigid for hours until the predator loses interest. Second, they are like mini tanks. Their armor is incredibly hard. Even lizards and birds find it difficult to break through. Day 60. Both colonies were stronger than ever before. The only thing separating them was that river, so it was time to build a bridge. For the first time, the two worlds were connected. At first, nothing happened. It wasn't until a few hours later that 2 brave ants stepped onto the bridge, and then they finally met for the first time. They touched each other's antennae, as if exchanging information, and then continued along the path into the other's territory. For the first time, they stepped onto each other's land not as enemies, but as a unified whole. The ants chose peace. Within minutes, ants from both sides began freely traveling back and forth. Just like a family, they had already merged into a massive super colony. The nymph was still waiting for its next meal. Remember that lotus pod? The ants finally conquered it. After days of gnawing, they broke through the shell, dragged the seeds out, and transported them back to the tribe. Day 70. The nymph has completed its metamorphosis into a dragonfly, but it is not yet ready to fly. Its wings still need time to harden. 100 days. A civilization experiment originally between the exact same species. From hostility to integration, from division to unification. Through their antennae, pheromones, and bodies, the ants taught us a truth. Survival is never a single-choice question. It can be cooperation, or it can be war. And civilization quietly grows amidst these tiny choices. I am Zai Yao. Did you guess the ending of this experiment correctly? Follow me, the next episode will be even more ruthless. If 2 ant tribes were separated by a river, one side a rainforest paradise, and the other a desert hell, do you think they would fight to the death for survival, or would they choose to shake hands and make peace? If there were